You're listening to episode 17 of the D6 podcast.
Here's the encouragement I give you. The shortest distance between your child's heart, your grown child's heart, and Christ is you.
Parents need to own that they are the primary disciplers of their child.
Our goal in parenting is not for our kids ultimately to get a great education, as good as that is. Our goal is not for them to be great athletes. Our goal is not for them to go on great dates and find a great husband or a great wife. Our goal is not for them to have a great career with a great job, making great money. Our goal is for them to love a great God.
You're listening to the D6 podcast. Here's your hosts, Ron Hunter and Jeremy Lee.
This is the podcast that helps you build an excellent family ministry in your church. And boy, are we going to do that today. I mentioned as we were coming out of last week's show, this is a tutorial on one of the hardest things for a lot of us to do. I know I was a minister for 20 years, and dealing with crisis moments was not one of my fortes. How did you handle it, Ron? Were you good at crisis moments?
You know, here was my philosophy on that. I could deal calmly with crisis, but I would quickly assess it and decide if I needed to refer somebody to a more professional counselor or whoever, and I never minded doing that. So, that was always the deal, and I think people will respect that, and they need help, and they don't need somebody faking it. And Leneita Fix certainly does not fake it. The lady you're going to interview today, she's got it going on, but crisis is tough. And the part that is difficult with crisis is it eats up your time, energy, and mental capacity, and then you still have the rest of your to-do list to tackle for the week.
And Ron, I think this would be an interesting conversation because this is one of the things that I guess I struggled with. I noticed as a professional minister at a church, it's almost like a first responder. You're around crisis so much. In order to do your job, you almost have to guard your heart against feeling it too deeply. I don't know if that makes sense. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Because if you felt crisis all the way down to your toes every time, you would just live in sadness and misery. At some point, you had to I don't know how to explain that, but I remember thinking of, it's almost like how ambulance drivers and police officers, in order to do your job, you kind of just have to be able to feel it just enough, but stay focused on your role in the situation.
No, you're right, because oftentimes if a pastor or ministry leader is dealing with a crisis, when you come home to your family, the key question is, how do you turn it off? I had a light switch in my garage that whenever I pulled in at the end of my day, regardless of whatever went on, my goal was when I flipped the light off in the garage and walked through that pedestrian door into my kitchen, into my home, that was my intentionality to turn off my day and turn on my family. And I had to work hard at that. Otherwise, my mind would still be locked around that crisis or that couple who's hurting or that, parent who's grieving over a child issue. And it was really tough. Now, there's a flip side, Jeremy. Did you ever feel this? Because I know sometimes I can on a repeated, when the crisis is repeated within the same family, sometimes we can go to the point of not feeling it deep down to our toes, as you say, but we can become cynical, a little calloused. I don't know if you ever felt that, but yeah. I struggled with that.
Well, I remember one of the churches I worked with, we had little prayer meetings every day before we got started with our day. And, everybody would bring up everybody's crises. And these are like huge things that, because it's just a routine part of your day, I had to get myself into a good place where I actually let myself feel that moment when I was praying for those people.
That's right.
But it was tough because
Yes.
It's crisis. You don't get into ministry without dealing regularly with crisis, and there's a part of that is hard. And I'm curious about the folks that are listening to that, if you guys feel that same way too, because I sometimes sense that. Now, there's another piece of this, and this is kind of a fun discussion. I know we need to get to the interview, but I want to talk about this for just a second, because I can remember twice in my ministry journey where I got the call about the death of a student, and I arrived before the first responders did because I was just close or
Oh,
near the
wow.
situation.
Yeah.
And I remember being in the room with a parent and their child right after the child had died. Twice I had that moment, and those were sacred moments. And I would say this: I think there is a sacredness to being a minister that gets regularly invited into people's crisis, and people connect to you in a way they'll never forget you because you are now attached to these moments that are so dramatic in their lives.
And I think you've said it there. It is a connect, and sometimes people don't know how to handle those crises. But the key that most everybody would tell you is exactly what you did, Jeremy. Sometimes it's just being there. You don't have to have the words, you don't have to have the expertise, but show up, be there, be loving, be compassionate. It will endear you to that family, but it will open up doors to continue to speak into their world.
Yes, and I think the longer I was in ministry, the more the less I said in crisis.
Yes.
Um, but I will tell you early on, I wish I would have had this interview that we're about to listen to, because Leneita Fix, who has decades of experience in dealing with these kind of situations, literally goes step by step. So if you have a volunteer team or something like that, this might be a link to share with them, because Leneita Fix is about to take all of us to school. After the break, we'll hear from her on how to minister to a family in crisis.
What's it like to be a member of the D6 Leader Network? Well, what if I told you that you could hire an intern for your ministry that would plan your sermon series each month and create amazing graphics to help promote it? What if that same intern helped you train your volunteers by writing an online teacher training every month that includes a fully produced video without you even having to touch it? What if that same intern created a fully designed parent resource that they can actually use to help them spiritually lead their family? What if that same intern was able to get you access to every main stage talk, breakout, or interview D6 has ever done at their D6 conference for your own training and development? That would be the best intern in the history of the world, right? Well, becoming a member of the brand new D6 Leader Network is like hiring an intern to do all of that and more for around $1 a day. We make your life easy. We make awesome easy. If you are a minister, you can go to d6leadernetwork.com to learn more.
Okay, so my guest today is someone that it's been cool to get to know over the past year even more. She's worked with us over at parentministry.net. She works, let me just go down the list of who she works with at some capacity as a writer and a content provider. Leader Trek, Simply Youth Ministry, Lifetree Family, Download Youth Ministry, parentministry.net, N-Word, D6, YM360. Anybody else?
No, I think that's it.
Got any other room in your schedule? Leneita Fix has been involved in family and youth ministry for over 22 years. She served in rural, suburban, and urban settings, camps, small and large churches, and nonprofits. So you've worked with everybody. You've been in every setting. Reading your bio, I think you're like 97 years old. All this stuff.
Some days I feel 97.
She's written tons of books. Let's see. Everybody's Urban, Understanding the Survival Mindset of the Next Generation. How Do I Know? A Teen's Guide to Dealing with Doubt. And she contributes to all these other stuff. So all this, let's get down to the most important part. You live with a youth group, hashtag, and
yes,
your amazing husband, John, and 4 children in Florida.
Yes.
Florida. You like Florida?
I love Florida.
I know.
I could never be landlocked. It would be horrible. Actually, one of my children wants to go to college in Colorado, and I said, you do know that it's really far away from the ocean. She said, I'm okay with that. You're not okay.
You're not.
She said, will you ever visit me? I said, oh, yes, I love the mountains. I'm just not living there. So
Perfect. Okay, so I want to drill in. Okay. I want to drill in, and I got serious real fast if you noticed that just then, because this is serious.
It is.
We're going to cover how to minister to a family in crisis.
I know you gave me the easy topic.
Well, I knew you could handle it because you're like a ninja youth worker. You've got this.
Okay.
But I want someone who's listening to this. They might be a volunteer. They might be a minister, and they're going to do ministry at any amount of time, they're going to face someone who's in some kind of crisis, tragedy, some kind of major life event that is going to need an extra amount of ministry, extra different kind of attention. And I just want to walk through that, almost like this could be a training video for them.
Okay.
So let's do this. Let's just say with this, let's imagine that I just got the call that one of the families in my ministry is in crisis. What do I do first? What's my first step?
It really depends on what the crisis is. You kind of touched on this when you were asking the question. There's a difference between crisis and tragedy. So a tragedy is a life-altering event. You find out a child has taken their life, or you find out somebody has died, or you find out that an addict has been taken, a family member's been taken away. That's a tragedy, and that's where we go into immediate action, and we need to take off our reservations in being there for the family in a tragedy. I think we overthink, should we or should we not be there in the form of a tragedy. Something recently had happened in our own ministry, and you think to yourself, well, should I go to the hospital? Well, I'm not immediate family. I shouldn't be at the hospital. And I think we need to stop overthinking that and just show up. Because that family, when they've had that tragedy, they're not even thinking straight, and they need as many people around them as possible to love on them and support them. A crisis is almost what happens after the tragedy, or it's something that's going to happen over the long term. So you find out a family's in crisis and they're going to get divorced. That's crisis. That's something that requires a long-term plan and really thinking through, okay, what is going to be the process of walking with this family for the long haul? Am I going to need support? Am I going to need to bring other people in? So that's really the first step, is identifying what's happened. So if you get the call and somebody's getting a divorce, you're going to take one course of action. If you get the call and somebody's in the hospital, go to the hospital.
That's a great distinction. See, you're starting off really well. Good job. Okay, so what do I say to the family when I first make contact? And I guess for the rest of the time, let's choose so that we know. Okay, I want to go with tragedy.
Okay.
So let's say it's a tragedy. I feel like I just did a answer on Jeopardy. I'll go with tragedy for 500, Alex. Okay, but what do I say to the family when I first make contact with them? Give me some direction on not just what to say, but also how to say it. So I'm calling the family, or I'm showing up at the hospital, and we start to talk.
I think one of the things that is good about our social media driven culture is that things get out really, really fast. So everybody finds out about something really fast. It used to be you had to be on the phone tree to figure it out. So I think the first step, so it makes it a little less awkward if you don't know the family very well, is really my point. If you have a deep relationship with the family, obviously it's easy. You just show up, I'm here, and I just want to love on you. If you don't know the family very well, I think it's just sensitively saying, I'm here to help, I'm just here, I just want to support you, I'm here for whatever you need. And then really the key in that is being genuine about whatever they need. I had read once this idea of there's circles of people that help you with your grief. So you have the people that are, the smallest circle is the people who are closest to you, and then the concentric circles go out in the people that surround you. What I thought was interesting about it was that what the article said was that you need all of those people in all of those circles, but you, as the person grieving or dealing with the tragedy, are going to interact with those circles differently. So the people closest to you are going to be the people that you're going to automatically turn to and say, cry on their shoulder, start sobbing, start breaking down. They're going to be the people that you will automatically turn to, but that doesn't mean you don't need the people out here that say, I'll go pick up your laundry, or I'll pick up your other kids from school, or do you need coffee? So it's really just showing up and telling them that you're there, and then really assessing how, this sounds very strange, how coherent they are. If they're just completely a puddle, you may need to do some things that think for them. Hey, I'm going to go pick your children up from school right now. If they're more coherent, then you can say, what do you need? But sometimes I think of really close friends of ours had found out that their son had overdosed on heroin. And when we showed up at their house, literally the mom was on the floor rocking back and forth, just with like incoherent sobbing. And we were very close to them, so what I did was just immediately get on the floor and start holding her. A couple hours later, a pastor who wasn't even the pastor of their church, a pastor friend of a friend who knew them, kind of more knew of them, was an acquaintance, showed up at the house and just sat next to her and said, "I'm here," and then started mobilizing everyone. Okay, somebody's got to make dinner. Okay, somebody's got to go take their dogs out for a walk. Somebody's got to go do this. And I think that model has really been the way that we do things is, okay, where do we fall in relationship to this person in the tragedy? So sometimes we're the person holding, and sometimes we're the person mobilizing.
That's beautiful. Great distinction and good job on that. Okay, what about the situations we face when we know about a crisis, but we're not supposed to know? And we'll kind of, I guess, shift back to crisis on this one. It's similar to a divorce. Like, I've been in situations, I know, and this is kind of what's bringing it out, is where I understood and knew and heard through the grapevine that a couple was about to be divorced, and I didn't know how to handle that because you want to respect their privacy, but at the same time you want to be there. And so how would you handle that kind of situation?
Text them and say, "Don't do it." No, I actually ended up in a very strange situation that was like that with some friends. When I was looking at that question, I was thinking it through because the husband was completely confiding in my husband, but the wife was denying everything. And the husband was saying to my husband, "You can talk to Leneita, I know, because I want her to know, because I want her to pray for this situation. But when she approaches my wife, she can't act like she knows anything." Mm-hmm. And it was horrible because I really wanted to say, "Girl, what are you doing? Like, what's going on?" And so I think what is good about those situations is we're not allowed to. It keeps us from reacting to the divorce and saying, "You can't do that. You can't do that to your children," and placing judgment. It makes us think through the scenario. And so I think really what we can do is be like ninja supporters and kind of come alongside. So let's say you're the youth pastor. You may know that student needs a little bit more support. So you don't want to be weird and say, "Hey, we've never hung out before, let's hang out every day." But it is okay to say, "Hey, I've been thinking it would be great to hang out and get to know each other a little bit better." And kind of covertly begin to build that relationship, or have their small group leader kind of key in on their small group leader with that. "Hey, you might want to spend a little extra time with them so that when this does come out and is public, they've already got some support mechanisms in place." Or just building deeper relationships with the couple a little bit. "Hey, would you want me to maybe make dinner for you guys this week?" Offer some practical help to them. Basically kind of begin to come underneath them and gird up a little bit so that when it is open, you're not going, "Oh yeah, I knew," but you are kind of already there so that you can step into that helping and walking out position with the family.
Awesome. It's a good one. Okay, so how do we mobilize others in the church to help a family in crisis?
That is probably the hardest thing. I was thinking through that because we have just gone through a situation in our ministry over the last month where we do inner city ministry, and there was a young man from our ministry who was in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong people, and he was shot and killed. A month before that happened, his mom had found out she has cancer. She actually started chemo treatments the day after he was shot. And so one of the things that I reached out to the family, just because you kind of mentioned it's true. We have kind of done this ministry for a while where we're kind of dealing with these crises. So I just reached out to the family, knew the boy really well, knew his mom okay, but didn't know the rest of the family really well. Point is, reached out to the family, "Hey, is there anything we can do? Does your mom need someone to sit with her for chemo?" They said yes. So I started going to sit with mom during her chemo infusions. Well, I needed help. And I think with other people doing that. And so I think that what I realized, even again, in this very recent thing happening, was my heart, because my heart is breaking for this mom who's just lost her son and has cancer and is going through weekly chemo treatments, this horrific life event. I just wanted everybody to step up and do everything to really support this family. And so I think the first piece was the recognition that not everybody's going to, and that's okay. We're the body, and so we're all called to different things. We are called to be compassionate and cry with those who cry and laugh with those who laugh. But so then what I do is really put it out to the church and kind of make it into small edible nuggets that people can do. So with the chemo infusions, I said, okay, they're on Thursdays from this time to this time. Could you come for 30 minutes and sit with her? So yes, I have sometimes taken 6 hours to sit there with her, but I recognize not everybody has 6 hours, or 6 hours might sound intimidating. And so you want to kind of set it up so that people will feel like, well, I can do that small thing. And then we'll be able to, it's going to shake out that certain people that build a relationship with the family in crisis are going to just feel led to do more. And that's okay. So I think it's more putting out, you have to think through, okay, what are all the different facets? Okay, it's 30-minute blocks. Okay, could somebody maybe make dinner for this family every once in a while? And kind of put out, people sometimes don't know what to do. It's not that the church doesn't want to support the family in crisis or the person in crisis. They don't know what to do, and we are so afraid of overstepping our boundaries. And well, I'm going to offend that person, so we have the tendency to go the other way and do nothing. So I think it's really, if you're the person who cares about that person in crisis, kind of breaking it down for the church and making it easy so somebody can go, well, yeah, I can make a pot of spaghetti, or I have 30 minutes, or yeah, I could swing by. One of the things that's been happening is she's been dehydrated because chemo really dehydrates you. So somebody needed to swing by and bring her some water the night before. So I can swing by, and then what happens is you kind of get duped into caring. That sounds horrible, but you kind of do, because you go in with the intention of, I'm just going to drop the water and go, and then before you know it, you're having a conversation and drinking the water with her, and it's become a relationship.
That's good. It seems that when crisis strikes a family, everyone comes around to help, but then there's this season a few months or weeks later when everybody's gone. You talk to enough people who've gone through some kind of tragedy or crisis, then usually they will say something to like that. How can we show up during the lonely part of the crisis?
Well, a mentor of mine said to me once that in crisis situations, you have to have a betterment and a development mentality. And so the betterment mentality is, how can I make their lives better for today? That's when the tragedy happens. That's when you come around. The development attitude is more of a structural attitude that does walk out life for the long haul and is willing to come alongside them, but in a way that isn't still getting everybody stuck in tragedy mode. Because if they get stuck in tragedy mode, it's unhealthy. Grieving is a process, and it can take a lifetime. And so if tragedies happen or the crises happen, and then you're grieving the loss of a marriage, or it's not just grieving the loss of a loved one in death, you're grieving the loss of a marriage, or you're grieving the way your family situation has changed, or you're grieving that you have cancer and life shouldn't be like this, that how can you come alongside them? So I think sometimes in ministry, we have to be the people who, yes, are the first responders, but then look at the people, allow the other people who are good at being the first responders be the first responders. And then we really need to almost be the shepherds. When you think of a shepherd, they don't just feed the sheep once and then leave. They're caring for the sheep. And so we're really the shepherds that are willing to help people understand for the long haul how to walk it out for life. So that same situation with the family that had the son who died, we actually moved away 3 months after he had passed away. And so what I did is I just texted her every day for 2 years. Hey, I love you. Hey, I'm thinking about you today. Hey, I'm praying you. And sometimes she'd text me back. Sometimes she'd call me back. Sometimes she didn't. And she has told me on multiple occasions. Now, after 2 years, it didn't need to be every day anymore. It could be once a week. It could be every 3 weeks. But on the other hand, there was a couple that brought them over for dinner once a week. And so it's just really you mobilizing to be one of those people, and mobilizing others to say, hey, could you kind of dig in your heels for the long haul? Because it is true. My family was one of those families that had some long haul crises when I was growing up, and I think that was what was hardest for my parents. And what happens to those people, though, in those lonely spots when they're in crisis, is what they begin to believe is that God has given up on them. And that's why this is so vital, is because they begin to think it's so lonely, nobody cares, I'm still grieving, I can't get over this, why don't people know I'm never going to get over this thing, or I'm never going to get beyond this thing. Nobody cares. And as people, because we can touch and we can talk to people, we then put that on God. So then they begin to say God doesn't care about us. And I'm not saying that we need to be God and come alongside them and be their savior. What I'm saying is that that's the unfortunate repercussion that happens when they don't have long haul people that come alongside them. So I'm not saying, but if we have that attitude that it's a development attitude, we're also not making them the victim for the next 5 years. We're supporting them and walking with them.
Love it. Well, you've served us today, for sure. That means you get to have the right to tell us about some projects you're working on, because I know with all this long list, and I know about some projects, you've got a lot going on. So tell us, what's something we can get excited with you about that you're working on right now?
So I have 3, and
Okay.
one is going to sound very promotional for you, but I am really excited about it.
It's
So
okay with me.
So I'm going to start with that one. I've been working on some stuff with Parent Ministry that I'm super excited about, that you had, or maybe together, I can't remember who had it, I think it was your idea, had this brainchild to begin to parents of teenagers are so overwhelmed that they want to disciple their kids, but those practical steps and how to. So there was this idea to put small group curriculum together for youth pastors to teach parents in how to do things with their kids. So you guys are putting that together in some bundles, and the first one comes out really soon.
Mm-hmm.
And the first one's on helping parents navigate social media with their kids. And I think it's going to be really powerful and really awesome. So I'm really excited about that one. And then I have a devotional coming out with YM360 in October. I think we're going to call it Doubt. We keep changing the name. But the idea behind it is it's not apologetics. It's kids struggle with hard questions, and we struggle with them as adults. And so we don't often give students youth the space to wrestle with those hard questions. So it's a devotional that is really it's 8 weeks. The very first week is, how do I know I'm allowed to doubt? And then it's, how do I really know I have a relationship with Jesus? I've gone forward 500 times at camp. I've prayed the prayer 5 trillion times. And then we're doing an online component that is geared towards the parent, but we recognize it might need to be a mentor that does it, that really helps talk to the kids about the questions. And what that does is create a safe place for adults to say, hey, I still have these questions too. I still, Pete Wilson had said it this morning. If I told my congregation all of the doubts I have all the time, they'd probably run away. But it gives that safe space. And then the third one is a book coming out in the spring with Randall House. Actually, it's a parenting book.
Oh, cool.
So the working title right now is When You Live with the Youth Group. But it's basically, the idea behind it, I think we'll change the title of that too. But the idea behind it is parents of teenagers are super overwhelmed all of the time. So how do we connect back with our kids through all of these different mechanisms? So how do you take the car? The car has become the new family dinner table. So how do you intentionally communicate with your kids in the car? How do you navigate when your kids give you the eye roll and teeth suck that you want to punch them in the face, but you don't want to admit that to them, that you want to punch them in the face. So
I love it.
Kind of taking that stuff back. So I'm really excited about that too.
Man, those are all, they all
I'm
sound
excited.
great. It would be
Yes.
good.
Especially yours.
I'm kind of partial, but so if they want to find you online, they can go to everybodysurban.com, but then probably better, they could go to Twitter at Leneita Fix.
Yes.
And thank you so much for being here. Great job.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you so much.
Are you looking for the right conference to attend this year? The D6 Conference is a family ministry conference designed for your entire ministry team. Come hear from over 30 speakers and network with churches that share your passion for reaching families. Family ministry isn't just another program. It's one of the most important things your church can do to make a difference in your city. At the D6 Conference, you'll be inspired and equipped to take your family ministry to the next level. To learn more about the D6 Conference, just go to d6conference.com.
Well, I don't know if any of you knew Leneita Fix before that interview, but you've got to be impressed with her now. She put out a book with you guys.
I was going to say the beauty of this is she's talking about how to minister to a family in crisis, and she did that interview with you several months ago. We've kind of held that in queue for a while, and since then she has finished a book called Beautiful Chaos, which that's how she describes parenting. And parenting sometimes deals with those crisis moments, and man, what her if you loved what her sound and her insight was, you'll want to dive into the pages of her most recent book, Beautiful Chaos.
Yeah, and it's time now, though, to revisit with a friend of the show, seminary professor that doesn't sound like a seminary professor. That's my best way to always describe him.
That's
Mr.
right.
Timothy Paul Jones.
And by the way, the topic he's going to deal with is probably one of the number one questions people ask of family ministry. So let's dive into it. I'm sitting here with Dr. Jones, who's been on a 3-city tour talking about family ministry. You've been to St. Louis, you've been to Lexington, you're finishing up today in Nashville. You are the professor of Christian family ministry at Southern Seminary. You're a renowned author. You're a champion of family ministry, youth ministry. I'm just so thankful to have you with us. I've got one question for you for our D6 podcast listeners. I know there are a number of people who are listening right now who have a lot of children coming to their church and their parents are not present. And they look and they go, how can I do family ministry when there's only children or only teenagers? Are they exempt from this family ministry question?
Well, I would say certainly not. They're not exempt. But I also want to follow up with that something. I know your pain on that. I know what you're dealing with, what you're facing. I spent almost 9 years in a particular congregation where in that congregation, almost 2/3 of our kids came from one parent or no parent homes in terms of church involvement. Very poverty-stricken neighborhood where our church was within blocks of multiple known drug houses at that point. I know what you're talking about in that, and I know what you're feeling if you're in that particular context. And so here's some encouragements I want to give to people in that context. Number one, never give up on the families. Never give up on them. It's so easy for you to just try to become the parent for these kids. And sometimes you do that wanting to love them because you do love them. But those parents, even if those parents don't know it yet, are still the primary disciple makers in their children's lives, in the sense that they're the primary people who are forming those children's lives into what they'll be.
Good or bad, correct.
Good or bad.
Yes.
Either way, they're making they're having an impact on those kids. And so if I could do one thing over, it would be to be even more involved in those parents' lives, and really even more, even those that were barely sober enough literally to open the door, that I would be more involved in those people's lives at that point. One of the things we did that was actually a good thing to do in that we stopped referring to those parents as unchurched or non-Christian, and I started having our staff refer to them as pre-Christian parents. And I did that because I wanted them to confess every time we mentioned those parents, they're pre-Christian. That is to say that we believe God can save even them. And that was why I did it. I wanted to change the script and change the way of perceiving these parents, that we're not perceiving them as the drug-addicted parents. We're not perceiving them as the absent parents. We're not perceiving them as the failed parents. We're perceiving them as pre-Christian parents. They're just not there yet. And it changed the script of how we talked about them and how we focused on them. In terms of some just real practical things, there were 10,000 things I can tell you that we did that failed miserably. And I mean, I can tell you years of failures at this level. I can tell you a couple of things that both in that congregation, but also in some congregations I've consulted with later, that have worked, that have been successful, helpful things in terms of working with these types of families. One of those things with these families that I would really suggest that you think about, that you wrestle with, how do I do this in my church, is what's called families in faith. Simply having a family in faith. So every kid that comes to your church, every youth, every child, have a strong, healthy family assigned to that child. If they're coming with no parents or only one parent, have a strong, healthy family assigned to that. When I've done this and it's gone well, that was that person, that family's only volunteer role in the church. It's when that kid comes, you welcome that kid. When that kid shows up at a church dinner, you invite them to sit at your table. When there's an event that you think their parent is not going to make it to that event, you show up at that event. That's your role. That's your task. You are what I call a family in faith. That's who you are for that child. And that's one of the most important things. And I just told earlier a story about just a real life thing of how practical this gets, of a kid that came to our church. His name was Sebastian, and we assigned him a family in faith. And Sebastian would have to go to the bathroom during the sermon every single Sunday, and he couldn't just slip out quietly in the back. No, that wasn't possible for Sebastian. No, he had to come up, usually toward the end, right when I'm giving the invitation, winding down that part of the sermon, up to the front, walk across, wave at people he knew, and say hi to people, and go across and go out to the restroom. So that family in faith that was assigned to Sebastian, part of their role was, hey, make sure Sebastian goes to the bathroom before he comes into worship on that. It gets that practical with your families in faith. So that's the number one thing. Could develop a clear family and faith system, and not only do that, train them and value them. I would want you to have every year a dinner in which you celebrate what they do and you tell them you appreciate them. So value them, because remember, your church doesn't replicate what it doesn't celebrate. Your church will never replicate what it doesn't celebrate. You want to have this system and you want to replicate it across the church, celebrate it. That's how it will happen.
Okay, everybody,
So
write that down. You cannot replicate what you do not celebrate. That's priceless.
We need to do that in our churches. And so we think that if we just train people, which is good, or if we just tell them to do that's good, you want people to do it and do it over and replicate it, celebrate, have a party over it. That's what people will do, and that's what they'll really follow. So families in faith, they have to be treated in that way. The second thing I would say in that is make a system in which you organize all those families into some groups and assign them to key volunteers, mentors, staff members, whatever the size of your church allows, such that at least once a year we get people into each home of these kids. Just get them into the home. Here's how we've done it in some churches I've consulted with, and just as a recommendation for how you can do this. To have people who will, at least once a year, they'll say to these families, these people, hey, I'd love to come into your house to share what your kid's going to be doing in the next year in church. And just go and share. And then if your church can afford it, tell them, hey, once you've scheduled that time, say, hey, we'd love to feed your family tonight with some pizza. We'd love to send some pizza. Their church pays for it. We'll feed you. Share with them. Appreciate that they let their kid come to church and value that, and share what their kid's going to be doing in the upcoming year. And if you have opportunity, share the gospel with them. Those are some nuts and bolts practical ways that we can impact those types of households.
So I'm going to review. Never give up. Refer to those parents who are not in church as pre-Christian. Assign the children who do not have parents in church a family in faith. And then try to organize a way to go and visit those parents, not to make them feel guilty, but to thank them for letting their child be in church and talk about what's going on, share the gospel with them. That's so practical. Thank you for that. If they want to dive further into other resources you've written, what would you recommend? One book, two books that would really help them?
The two books I would really recommend is grab my book, Practical Family Ministry. Randall House did that just last year, Practical Family Ministry. That just gives a whole lot of practical tips of how to do family ministry. The second one that's more strategic, more for your staff, is the Family Ministry Field Guide. So Practical Family Ministry and Family Ministry Field Guide. Grab those, learn more about it.
I can vouch for both of those excellent works. Thank you, Dr. Jones, for being with us today.
Thank you. It's been great to be with you.
Okay, that was Timothy Paul Jones. Thank you for being with us, Timothy. We appreciate it.
Practical stuff. Love it.
It's only episode 17, and he's been on here twice.
He has.
So
you understand how important his message is.
I mean, seriously. I hope you feel loved, my brother, because we're throwing you out there. I love that you guys have listened to this all the way through. Thank you for doing it. It's an investment that you're making in yourself, and ultimately a gift that you're giving to the families in your ministry. thank you for being a learner. This is important. And I appreciate that you have come this far on the podcast. And I hope you'll be with us next week, because one of my best friends in the world, I call him Coach Chef. He was my ministry coach and one of my mentors and became one of my best friends. Tom Chef Shunas, who is the middle school minister at North Point Community Church in Atlanta with Andy Stanley. He'll be with us next week. And then we'll also have Jason Byerly, right?
That's correct. Two great ministry leaders, very insightful, and great interviews we have coming up.
All right, so we'll see you next Tuesday.
See you then.
We'll be talking about unleashing small groups in your ministry. Look forward to it. Thank you for listening.
You've been listening to the D6 Podcast. You can learn more about D6 at d6family.com. And if you're a minister, we invite you to join the D6 Leader Network by going to d6leadernetwork.com.